Force the gun laws that we already have. People with possible ties to terrorism who aren't allowed on a plane shouldn't be allowed to buy a gun.
Residents after Sunday's massacre at a gay nightclub. A new report finds that malnutrition is becoming the new normal across the globe. And a Canadian inventor showcases a new prototype in successful flight. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Barack Obama is set to visit Orlando, Florida Thursday to pay his respects to the families of the victims of Sunday's mass shooting at a predominantly gay nightclub that killed 49 and wounded more than 50. Mr. Obama has called the mass shooting an act of terrorism and hate. VOA's Arasha Rabasadi has more from Orlando.
It's been just a short time since a shooting rampage at Orlando's Pulse nightclub. The lone gunman killed 49 and wounded more than 50, some of them gravely.
The past 24 hours have been almost absolute hell.
Just one day after the shooting, Terry DiCarlo's organization had raised more than $1.5 million to cover victims' hospital and funeral expenses.
Although my heart is breaking inside, I'm mourning in there, and later on tonight, when I finally do get home, I'll collapse and let it out.
It was here on Orange Avenue that police say Omar Mateen carried out his rampage.
It's just really, really sad that something like this has happened here in Florida and America. All of it, you know.
Yeah, I grew up in this neighborhood right here off of Grand Street. I went to schools around here. You would never think anything like this would ever happen. But unfortunately it has, and it's a sad day in Orlando.
The shooting sparked fresh scrutiny of Islam in America, something Salam Bati says the community must address.
We need to invite more people to our mosques. This is not a reason to lock our doors. The extremists want us to lock the doors to our mosques so we can drive people to their groups.
As night falls, thousands gather for a vigil in downtown Orlando. It's a show of unity not just by the LGBT community, but also by many in this city who struggle to cope with the terror that gripped Central Florida just days ago. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Orlando, Florida.
Well, for the latest investigation details, VOA's Ramon Taylor joins me live via Skype from Orlando. Ramon, welcome. And first tell us, what is the latest that we know now about this shooter?
Well, some late details of Omar Mateen that a lot of reporters here idea going into the first day and you know some people who claim that they Omar Mateen in.
Well, looks like we have a problem there with this guy. Okay, Ramon, we'll try this again. We're running into a little trouble there trying to talk to Ramon Taylor, who is reporting to us live via Skype from Orlando in Florida. Now, turning a little bit to Africa. In East Africa, Somalia is a victim of frequent terrorist attacks. Now, I spoke with Somalia's Prime Minister, Omar Abdirashid Sharmake, and sought his thoughts on Sunday's mass shooting in Orlando.
It's very heartbreaking, really, what happened in Orlando. I think it's a really very barbaric and horrific act. We extend our condolences to the U.S. government, to the people of the United States. We really, I think, want to extend our special kind of condolences to the families and the loved ones who really lost their loved ones in that horrific act. And we hope and wish a very speedy recovery for the ones who were injured. This is exactly what we are confronted with every day. And this is exactly the kind of ideology and the extremism we're dealing with back in Somalia.
You know, when this kind of acts happen in countries like here, or sometimes in the neighboring country of Somalia, that is Kenya, people tend to see this as extremist, radical Muslims killing Christians or people of other faith.
They're killing Muslims every day. They are killing and actually trying to assassinate people in the mosques. These have no place in Islam. And really, the people doing this, they are not a part of really what they are claiming to be. These are really radical insurgency, is a radical ideology that needs to be really confronted and defeated.
And lately we've been hearing of attacks, especially on the AMISOM troops, and a number have been killed. In as much as you've pushed Al-Shabaab away from Mogadishu, for example, how safe is Somalia compared to, say, 3 years ago?
I think it's much better than what it was 2 years ago. And we hope that we will continue to really get better. Nonetheless, and you have to understand that we are confronted with really very extreme ideology and human beings that are willing to die. And usually capital punishment is the highest punishment that human beings could be actually penalized with. If anyone wants to die and wants to kill, definitely they often tend to really cause huge damage. And nonetheless, we continue to really intercept some of the informations. This is an intelligence war. I think you need to really have a good intelligence to prevent such things. You need to intercept the communications and really go directly and take the offense to their own turf.
Well, that was my conversation with Somali Prime Minister Omar Abdirashid Sharmake. Now, it's getting harder for war criminals to avoid justice by disappearing into countries where fugitives have traditionally sought refuge. VOA senior investigative analyst Jeffrey Young reports high-tech police organizations and tougher international legal systems are helping to track down and prosecute those suspected of crimes against humanity. Now, please note, this report contains graphic images of human remains.
They're silent, but still screaming, calling on the world to bring their murderers to justice. Their cries rise up from the ground in places all over the world. Argentina, where Operation Condor slaughtered opponents of the state for 20 years. Rwanda, where ethnic hatreds in the 1990s culminated in tribal-related genocide. Srebrenica, a Bosnian town where Muslim men and boys were killed because of their faith. Somalia, where President Mohamed Siad Barre's brutality scorched the earth. In country after country, the question of justice is coming to the fore as the bones of victims are unearthed. In courtrooms in Africa, The Hague, the United States, and elsewhere, accused war criminals and mass murderers are being prosecuted. On May 30, former Chadian President Hissène Habré was sentenced to life in prison by the Extraordinary African Chambers and Senegal Tribunal set up by the African Union. This was the first time that a former national leader was prosecuted and convicted for human rights violations by the courts of another country. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ziad Ra'ad al-Hussein, noted the precedent set by Habre's conviction, saying that in a world scarred by a constant stream of atrocities, the ramifications of this verdict are global. The former Chadian president, however, disputes the conviction. He argues that the verdict of the Senegal-based African Chambers Court was invalid. Habre's attorney, Francois Serret, explained his position in an exclusive VOA Skype interview.
Mr. Habré was already tried in 2000 in Senegal. So our position from the beginning was the issue of double jeopardy. He could not be retried because specifically of a political decision of the president of Senegal, who was not happy by the Supreme Court decision of Senegal, saying that Mr. Habré should not be tried.
The Habré trial was held in Senegal partly because African leaders have long objected to the International Criminal Court at The Hague. They say the ICC unfairly targets Africans. While the U.S. Senate has not ratified the treaty that established the ICC, Washington does support the efforts of that court, according to George Washington University international law professor Ralph Steinhardt.
There has been a certain amount of informal cooperation between the United States government and the body that oversees the development and the operation of the International Criminal Court.
The United States also has its own laws on the subject, including the Alien Tort Statute, which gives the federal courts authority to try cases involving injuries to foreign nationals that occur overseas. Another law that pertains specifically to torture victims is currently being used in a Washington area federal civil case against a former Somali military commander now living in the United States. Yusuf Abdi Ali is accused of war crimes during the Mohammed Siad Barre regime. The lead counsel in the case, Kathy Roberts of the Center for Justice and Accountability, spoke to VOA via Skype.
They adopted a statute called the Torture Victim Protection Act, which provides a specific cause of action not only to foreigners but also to U.S. citizens for torture and summary execution. Our claims for torture and summary execution were clearly, by the congressional record, clearly meant to apply overseas, abroad, in other foreign jurisdictions.
Attorney Roberts says this case, which may go to the U.S. Supreme Court, makes it clear that while alleged perpetrators can move across borders, the victims of their crimes have a right to justice regardless of where they are.
Well, joining us now to answer a few questions on war criminals is senior investigative analyst Jeffrey Young. Hello, Jeff.
It's good to see you.
Now, first, we know this conviction of Hussein Habre was historic in Africa. Nobody thought it will ever happen. There are some updates, actually.
Yes, there is. His court-appointed defense attorneys have now filed an appeal against his sentence of life in prison for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
But at least for some who have been looking or seeking for justice over the years, they feel like this gives them hope. And we know that there's still a few guys out there. But what does this tell them? They cannot just sleep and have a good dream.
They used to move about with impunity. I mean, Habre was living in Senegal for many years before the case was actually brought against him at the Extraordinary African Chamber in Senegal Tribunal, which was put up by the African Union. But it took 16 years to get this prosecution going.
Which is tough usually. It's because you can't get the witnesses, especially when the person is living in a different country. And how has the U.S. been dealing with such things, especially getting evidence against a person?
As I mentioned in the report that I just did, there are two legal mechanisms in the United States to deal with this. One of them is called the Alien Tort Statute that dates back from the founding of the United States. And that gives federal courts jurisdiction to hear cases that are filed by human rights victims whose injuries took place outside the United States. Now, the second one is called the Torture Victims Protection Act. And that was enacted in 1991. And that it allows for federal civil suits against persons who have committed acts of torture or extrajudicial killing overseas. So there's two American legal mechanisms by which people who were harmed outside the United States can get justice and redress within the U.S. federal court system.
And sometimes also a little tricky to pin down people because especially if you think about the case of the guy who was a Somali operative then, it all depends on people actually identifying him and somebody coming forward and trying to sue this person.
Well, Yusuf Abdi Ali, the Somali national who had been living in the United States for 20 years and was found working as a security guard at Dulles Airport, his case is a civil case that's being brought by the Center for Justice and Accountability. It was brought against him under both the Alien Tort Statute and the Torture Victims Protection Act, okay? But what happened in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals was the provisions under which the Alien Tort Statute was being employed were tossed out. But the case continues under the Torture Victims Protection Act.
A strong warning to all those who may have committed crimes and are just lying low somewhere, right? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we very much appreciate your insights, Jeff. And Jeffrey Young is VOA's senior investigative analyst. Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, a new report reveals grim findings on global malnutrition. Stay with us.
science and technology, here's what's new.
What's new? The Nexar app, a smartphone app designed to help you avoid bad drivers. An Israeli developer created it to use along with a dash camera to warn drivers of tricky sections of road and reckless drivers. Iran Shir is Nexar's CEO.
It monitors all of the cars around you and tries to get you out of dangerous situations.
Shear says the app is more than just a recording device. It observes and interprets events on the road.
Nexar detected that there was a hard brake, and it automatically captures the events.
Also, data from accidents captured by Nexar can be used by the app to warn drivers about those locations.
If you're coming to an intersection the first time, or second time, then you'll get a warning with some data about the number of accidents in that intersection.
For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossans.
Well, it's time for a health reporter, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lina Madu with the latest on mental development research.
A new research says 1/3 of young children living in developing nations are failing to meet basic mental development milestones. And this could adversely affect their health, success in adulthood, and education levels. In the report, nearly 81 million children between 3 and 4 are not meeting basic developmental benchmarks. The highest numbers of affected children are from sub-Saharan Africa, including Chad, Sierra Leone, and Central African Republic. Study authors report that while poverty and malnutrition are contributing factors, more research needs to be done to understand the root causes of the problem. Researchers use data from the UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. Now, malnutrition has become the new normal and now affects 1 in 3 people worldwide. The 2016 Global Nutrition Report finds that 44% of countries are facing serious levels of both undernutrition and obesity. It says hundreds of millions of people are malnourished because they are overweight, and rates of obesity and overweight are rising in nearly every country in the world. In addition, the number of children under 5 who are overweight is now approaching the number of those who suffer from wasting or acute malnutrition. While undernutrition is falling globally, few countries are succeeding in tackling obesity. And the 4 main non-communicable diseases linked to it: diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and chronic respiratory diseases. Joining us in the studio for more is Asma Latif, Director of the Bread for the World Institute. Ms. Latif, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of time when we hear malnutrition, we have this tendency to link it to undernutrition. But this report clearly shows that obesity, overweight is a serious problem when it comes to malnutrition.
Absolutely. The Global Nutrition Report is really shining a spotlight on that double burden of malnutrition, which is the fact that there are, in many countries, as you said in the lead, have both undernutrition and overnutrition or obesity. The main challenge here is the issue of nutrients and access to the right nutrients. And that's really critical in early childhood, in that 1,000-day window between pregnancy and a child's second birthday. Mm-hmm. And the impact of undernutrition at that time in your life can have lifelong consequences. Yes. Undernutrition at that time is a cause of 45% of preventable child deaths. But if a child survives that undernutrition at that stage, it has a huge impact on their physical body. A lot of children, 1 in 4 children in the world is stunted, so they are too short for their age. And that outward manifestation of stunting is a signal of what's going on inside the body, and that has long-term health consequences.
Indeed.
So,
but when we look at the issue of obesity, it seems to be increasing globally, and it also seems like countries are having difficulty tackling this issue.
Absolutely.
What is happening?
So people are not getting access, young children and adults are not getting access to the right kinds of nutrients. Those kinds of nutrients tend to be a little more expensive. And so this issue is really an issue of inequality and poverty as well. High calorie foods, high energy foods, tend to be much cheaper and much more filling. So if you're a person in a village in a developing country and you have limited income, you spend that on what fills your stomach. I think, and not having access to, or sometimes not having the knowledge about what kinds of nutrients are necessary at different stages of life for the healthiest outcomes. So it's a question of education, but it's also a question of access and knowing what to do with the food.
And when we talk about the issue of income, that could be related. But we see that in a country like the United States, which is a developed country, a very wealthy country, obesity is really a serious issue here as well. So how do we reconcile this when we talk about poverty and the increased rate of obesity? Does it mean that the people that are, more people are obese in a poverty setting?
I think that definitely poverty is a huge factor. Again, if you have limited income, you buy what's most affordable, and if you have to feed a family, you're making choices all the time. The challenge in most countries is our agricultural policies have not really been aligned with our health policies, and so we have an abundance of foods that are not that nutritious, but very cheap to buy and very easily accessed. In the U.S., you've got a situation where in lots of urban areas there are food deserts, which basically means you have stores where you can buy chips and Coke and those kinds of things, but not fruit and vegetables. Those are not easily accessible.
So what are some innovative ways that can be adapted to tackle malnutrition and the goal by 2030, the SDGs? Is this even realistic?
It's absolutely realistic. What the Global Nutrition Report and other analysis has shown is that with the right mix of policies, political will, and resources, countries can make progress very rapidly. The Global Nutrition Report focuses on Brazil, Peru, China as examples of Ghana, as examples of very rapid progress when there's the right mix. So it is absolutely feasible. It's important that we begin to make the political choice to do the right thing. And the return, one of the wonderful statistics in the Global Nutrition Report, the return on investment is huge. For every dollar invested, you get a $16 return.
Economic impact is very important. We have to leave it there, unfortunately, and we understand the political weight. Very much important in this. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Latif. It was great to talk to you. And Asma Latif is director of the Bread for the World Institute. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, I'll find you on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, Lenore, thanks a lot. And be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Is this what the future of travel looks like? We'll be right back.
في البداية أود أن أتحدث عن الجانب الأمني والجانب العسكري والحديث الساعة اللي هو ما يحدث حاليا في جبهات وخصوص
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A rapt crowd in Montreal has gathered to see what could be a glimpse of the future. A man in flight. Inventor Alexandre Duro has been showcasing his newest prototype hoverboard, one that he hopes to one day make available to the public. Now, the board weighs just 30 kilograms, but can support a person weighing up to 70 kilograms. Powered by lithium batteries, it can fly for about a minute and a half. Duro controls it with a pair of pliers equipped with a sensor and a computerized system. His dream is to manufacture the first commercial hoverboard and eventually make it available to everyone who wants to fly. Well, next up, professional video gaming is becoming increasingly popular and, backed in the Philippines. Now, this is the classroom where players from the Minsky team train hard for their next tournament. They eat and sleep in this mansion, living alongside their teammates while focusing on improving their gaming skills. Minsky started out as a popular chain of internet shops in the Philippines. In 2004, the Minsky Professional Gaming Organization was formed with the aim of bringing Filipino gaming to the world stage. Earlier this year, they opened this gaming mansion, which provides everything the players need to stay glued to the screen. Now, with a strict schedule that requires them to train for at least 40 hours per week, the teams are being guided towards reaching their goals and climbing the rankings in national and regional tournaments. Well, and finally, wine is slowly becoming more popular in Japan. It's even closing in on sake in terms of consumption. So Amazon Japan is starting a new service to meet the need on demand, as some liars who wine lovers can call for wine buying tips. The tech giant will connect Japanese customers with certified experts who recommend which wine goes with what. Now, the site says the pairing can be especially be geared towards matching the still somewhat exotic alcohol with Japanese food. Then Amazon Japan ships one of its 8,000 wines straight to the customer's home. And that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Now, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
Does this word mean something good has happened?
Unleashed. The president is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to help build a coalition to defeat the militants who have unleashed a wave of violence that has included attacks on Iraq's Christians and other minority communities, and recently the videotaped killing of American journalist James Foley.
Unleashed means to let something very powerful happen quickly.
It is like taking a leash off a dog and letting it attack someone. In our story, the militants unleashed or set off a wave of violence.
Usually, unleashed does not mean something good.
So, the next time you hear the word unleashed, you will know what this news word means.